It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. It's good to see you. This is my Emil Amok's Takeout, the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs. AAPI, the Asian American Pacific Islanders. You can throw in a silent NH for Native Hawaiian. We're all included. It's all inclusive. Oh, and then the AAXs, it's my naming convention for the Asian American X. Filipino, F's, J's, Japanese, K, Koreans, H, Hmong, MI, Marianas Islanders. Hey, I'm all inclusive. That's why the last slash says the micro talk show of the AAPI, the AAXs, and the ALL. That's all the rest of you. You don't have to be all those other things. It helps because I'm looking at the news from an Asian American perspective. Now, my good buddy, David Feldman, who hosts the David Feldman podcast, and he has me on, and I talk, and he said, I listen to your show, and I admire you because you just open up the mic and talk. That's like, I guess, equivalent to someone just like taking a blade and bleeding for an hour or less, depends. And he said, he admired that, but he said, you talk a lot about identity. And I said, well, and I've known David Feldman a long time. He's an old friend of mine, comedian. We knew each other in San Francisco when I worked at the NBC affiliate. We both worked there. I was a reporter. He was a great assistant to news people. He was there. He was working on his comedy career. But when he knew me in the 80s, I really didn't have this sense, a strongest sense of Asian American identity, a strongest sense of Filipino American identity. And, it's fairly clear this week, if you read my columns on the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund blog, why that's so. In 1982, after Vincent Chin had his brains beat out of him, there was a discussion over whether or not Asian Americans were covered under the civil rights laws, if you can believe that. I mean, before, there was an effort at the federal level to go after the perp who murdered Vincent Chin. I mean, there was that discussion. It was still a binary black-white world back then. And so guys like me, guys and gals like me who grew up and we're trying to make our way in American society, we saw ourselves as part of the civil rights struggle, but a lot of people didn't. And when Helen Zia told me about that in 2017, about that being the case with Vincent Chin, it really was kind of mind-blowing in a way that late in the game, after the Civil Rights Act, we, meaning Asian Americans, were still having a hard time saying, here we are, we matter, we count. And maybe that's why a lot of us just sort of kept our heads down and just, we know how to succeed. We know how to get ahead. Just keep working hard. We'll get to where we want to go until we can't go any further. Because some invisible hand, sort of like Adam Smith, sort of pulls us out and says, no, you can't go there. And maybe for me, it wasn't until the mid-'80s that I began to see that I began to be much more knowledgeable about the Asian American experience and about the Filipino American experience. Because, certainly when I first met my friend David Feldman back in San Francisco in 82, I just had that You work hard, you'll get rewarded. Oh, you mean there haven't been any Filipinos working in this newsroom ever before? Well, they just didn't work hard enough. Did it occur to me that maybe it was racism? That maybe that there was some real discrimination at play? No, because I have good faith in our country. I have good faith in people. I have good faith in our society that hard work, honest, ethical, hardworking people will be rewarded. I was really naive. I was really naive. So, it was a way of telling David that I did not have this sense of identity politics. Also, consider the fact that it was only 1965 that the gates were open and allowed all of us, Asian immigrants, to come in. Right? There had been this damming up of immigration until the 1965 Hart-Celler Act, the Immigration Act in 1965, opened the door and said, those racist quotas, they're racist, they're illegal, let people in. There are still some problems with the Filipinos because there's a backlog, and it takes, after you apply for a visa, it still takes 10, 20 years to get in. But the gates really flew open in 65. Here we are, in 2021. Now, there's about 21, 22 million. If you count all the mixed race, maybe up to 23 million people, Asian Americans. And we count, we matter, we're here. Identity. People have been talking about identity since the 60s. But it hits people at different times, right? If you caught show 150, this is show 159, by the way. If you caught show 158, yesterday's show, and I did repeat it today, I'll repeat it throughout the weekend. I'll repeat 158 and 159 throughout the weekend on various platforms if you missed it. But I talked to Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez. We talk about Filipino-American history because this is October, Filipino-American History Month, and we talked about some of the salient points. And he was saying, hey, in 68, they fought for College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State University. Only now, 2021, and only because rich Asian American alumni gave 40 some $1 million to Harvard, are they now officially beginning to open up this, maybe an Asian American Studies program like no other. Let's hope. But look how long it took Harvard. Meanwhile, San Francisco State and my friend, Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez, right there at the beginning, 1968, with the student strike, a whole team that brought together the College of Ethnic Studies that remains there still at San Francisco State. You had Filipino studies, Asian American studies, all the other ethnic studies right there. It's not that young a thing. It's been around, but the consciousness certainly has been raised now that the populations have grown. Now that we have, are we at critical mass? When the minorities are the majority, right? And it's happening sooner than later. They had predicted 2050 and they keep dropping 2030. Now we're at 2021. It's probably going to happen by 2025. It's already happening in California. This is the new reality that people are dealing with. And, we still have to think about identity. We still have to think about identity politics now, because it's part of the truth. That's part of who we are as Americans. I've been dealing a lot with identity lately since I've discovered, mindfulness approaches and techniques. And one of the things that I have uncovered is this idea of how we look at ourselves, the identities, and how we identify who we are. And if you just list, like make some lists of like, here are some identities. I'm a bowler. I'm a sports fan. I'm a, a writer. You just take a piece of paper and list out all the different identities that aside from the basic racial, ethnic, class, all the different ways that you identify yourself in society. Make a list. I'm sure it's a list of 10, 20 things. PTA mother, poet, musician, and just after you have a list of, say, 10, 15 things, and don't forget the obvious things like race, class, ethnicity, geography. I'm a San Franciscan. I'm a Californian. I'm a red state. I'm a blue state. However you identify yourself, put down next to that identifier a B for benefit or an L for liability. Where do you benefit? And where does being that identity act as a liability? And keep score. Hey, I'm losing 5-2. I don't know how to going into the bottom of the ninth now. Got to pull it out. I'm just saying, it may reveal to you how your identities help or hurt you. And then you have to do some further investigation. Like, why do you have these opinions that being an Asian American is a benefit? Or why being Asian American is a liability? Is it because of the broader society? Is it because of, I'm in this white neighborhood and they don't know who I am or what I am? But every now and then, do a little checkup, an identity checkup, and see where you fit in and whether it's a benefit or a liability. If they've all got to be benefits. I mean, chances are they're not all going to be benefits, but they should be in an ideal world. But where they're liabilities, that's also worth exploring. Why? Is being an Asian American in 2021 a liability? Well, depends on who you talk to. I mean, I imagine when I was a teenager, I thought maybe it would have been better to be white. Maybe when I was in college, I thought, well, here it is. This is my license to be white. Or maybe when I met my friend David Feldman, I didn't have this sense of identity because I was fairly successful in my career. And, well, I was the Asian guy or the Filipino guy, but maybe a lot of the Filipinos thought I was assimilated. Why? Anyway, a little exploration on identity. But it shows you that where I was in the 80s is way different from where I am now. And we got to talk about identity now because, hey, there's people who want to take away our privilege. It is a privilege. Our privilege to talk about identity. There are people saying, oh, you're just American. Well, yeah, but only if being an Asian American or being a Filipino is a benefit. Because if it's a liability, I know how much of an American you think I am. And that's the way it works. Explorations. That's what we do on this. We talk, not necessarily, we're talking in public about these things because these are things that need to be discussed. What's an Asian American? What is Asian American identity? Oh, there was something in the New York Times magazine last week. And look, I like Jay Kang. We've met a couple times and talked. He's in not a weird place. He's in a place where I was, say, 30 years ago. Asian American, young kid, mixed race. You go among people who are successful or, in careers, and they're not making a lot of money, but they're, middle class journalists on their way. He's got his kid, he's trying to enroll her in soccer, and he's among other Asians, and they're all mixed race. Yeah. Well, you think it's hard now. What do you think it must have been like, say, 20, 25 years ago when I was that Asian with the Caucasian wife and the mixed race kids? And I know, I hope I left things in a better place for this next generation. It's just a matter of we keep layering and relayering, and hopefully we all learn from our mistakes and we all help each other out, and society grows and gets better. And then you can go back to that identity list and say, oh, being an Asian American, it's not a liability. It's definitely a benefit. Sometimes it is. Anyway, identity, my friend, David Feldman on the David Feldman podcast, he brought it up, and I said, God, that's a good question. Why do I talk about identity so much now than I did back in the 80s when I first met him? It's because identity matters. Because there are people trying to strip away our identity, trying to say, no, you're assimilated now. Oh, well, wait a minute. I got to stand in front of my gong now so you know exactly who you're talking to. Got my gong here in my closet. Identity. It's important. And part of identity comes with knowledge. That knowledge comes through history, the history that we're taught in schools. What kind of history were we taught in schools about Filipinos? Like 2 paragraphs worth? Oh, that's about the size of an average Filipino. I saw something today that's ridiculous. Texas schools where teachers are saying, well, we're going to teach the Holocaust, but I don't know if we can because we have to have an opposing view. The opposing view to the Holocaust, presumably you have an anti-Holocaust view. The opposing view to what should be taught in schools is Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler, the proponent of the Holocaust. You don't need an opposing view to the Holocaust. But this is how people are so gun shy, and how they're not clear enough about the moral truth, so that they get all kind of like, I don't know what to do. Oh, where's the authority? Who's going to tell me what to do? They're not strong enough, smart enough, educated enough to be independent thinkers to know, hey, morally, we just have to get at the truth. I wish more teachers were like that in Texas. But instead, they're the parents who say, hey, wait a minute. I don't want you teaching my kids anything that I don't want taught. Wow. That means we must assure that the next generation is as dumb and ignorant as their parents? That would never do in the old America. Anyway, identity. Still an issue, more of an issue, a greater issue as our country moves toward this new look, this diverse new look. Not just in California, not just in Texas, but all over. And, when I first heard about this idea, minorities being the majority, people of color growing, I think I first heard about it in 1989. I was excited. I thought this is going to be the solution to racism. We're going to have a love interest in everyone. We're going to mix. It's going to be great. We're going to be one America. Oh man, was I naive? Here we are, 30 years later, more divided and more in need of people just talking honestly about what's going on. Because if we came together and understood there's only one right way, teaching the opposing view to the Holocaust? Nah. I mean, it's getting ridiculous now. Yeah, I can understand. Well, we can't teach them Filipino American history because the Philippines. Well, they were our colony, but we don't. A million people lost their lives, civilians, but we don't need to teach them about all the bad wars. I mean, Vietnam's enough, don't you think? We don't have to teach them about the Philippine American War, where we bought the Philippines and they just went ape about stuff. They went amok, right? That's no good. We don't have to teach people that. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You know what's funny? For the African American community, there were the Buffalo Soldiers, right? The Buffalo Soldiers who went through America and they were taught to go after the natives, the indigenous, right? The Native Americans. They were so successful that they sent them to the Philippines to beat back the Filipinos. One smart Buffalo Soldier led a revolt to say, what are we doing here to the Filipinos? They're our brothers. I write about it on the ALDEF blog, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. It's true. The Buffalo Soldiers in the Philippines, they were a force for the Filipinos. And there was a group that actually deserted and joined the Philippines, the Philippine rebels, because they were rebels, right? After the Spanish-American War came the Filipino-American War, and they fought the Americans. They fought the U.S. Just think, I was wondering this. If the Filipinos had won that war, well, then would they have rights to win all of America, or at least part of America? Would they have right to maybe at least Daly City or something? Well, we beat you in the Philippines fair and square. I think we ought to have Daly City, Union City, and parts of Vallejo. Maybe the parts that don't grow, don't have wine grapes. You can have the rest of them. But the Philippines lost that war, and they became colonized. And that's how my father got here in the 20s. Anyway, a little Philippine American history that we sneak in, and a little talk about identity, because my friend Feldo brought it up. But I do talk about identity a lot. I think we're going to talk about identity for a lot until we cross the divide or cross the things that are dividing us, because it's important to talk about us as us, not just us as assimilated Americans. So yeah, we are assimilated Americans, but we're still us. That's important. All right, now I want to talk about a couple of other things. I want to talk about the Giants. I'm so sad about the Giants yesterday, but the truth is, and I owe this to my meditation and my mindfulness. It got me through. I took a deep breath. I said, look, the Giants lost. I'm not even going to question that check swing call that ended the game. I mean, it was a bad call. It was the wrong call. I think Wilmer Flores could have done anything. We don't know. He wasn't given a chance. I wish he was. I wish he I wish he was given the chance because I think the Giants were good enough to win. They were the best team in baseball this year, best managed team. They got the most for what they with what they had. And they weren't like the Dodgers who just seemed to buy. They're the kind of they're the team that were like the most like the Yankees, where they just buy players and come on our team. They were like that travel team you hate because they bring all the best players to play the rec teams, and the Giants were like a good rec team. People who lived in the area, your buddies, who you knew had like a couple of good games in them, but like every game they had to be top. They had to be firing all cylinders. They're just human. And the Dodgers had, well, we'll just replace this superstar with this superstar. We'll replace this unhittable pitcher with this unhittable pitcher. They had that kind of depth, and it was really incredible to see the Giants extend it as far as they did, and still the equilibrium between the two teams is incredible. Batting average, hits. It's just one game difference, but that's all you need, right? You just have to be that much better, just a flash better, and the Dodgers go on. So, but what really prepared me for this, and I thought it was the omen. I thought this was the omen. When the Giants got Chris Bryant, and I think I said this when Chris Bryant joined from the Cubs, and the Cubs were like selling off their teams or their star players. I go back to October 11th, 2016, Game 4 of the National League Division Series between the Chicago Cubs, who won 103 games that year, against the Giants, who were the wild card team with an 87-75 record. And of course, Giants playing the division leader Cubs. That's the way it was seeded, so the Cubs could go through. But the Cubs won the first two games. The Giants won the third, 6-5 in 13 innings. So it looked like, oh, maybe the Giants have a chance. And I was at the game. I was at game 3, where the Giants came back. Day after my birthday, October 10th. The Giants went 6-5 in 13 innings. And then game 4, October 11th, the Giants looked to win game 4. They scored in the 8th inning, and they took a 5-2 lead into the top of the 9th. And they just had to get the Cubs out. And the first Cub to start the rally, Chris Bryant. Gets a single, scores a run. The Cubs really rally. Javier Baez, Contreras. They score 4 times. They go ahead 6-5. The Giants down to their last out, bottom of the 9th. Brandon Belt versus Aroldis Chapman, the fireballing reliever in his heyday. And Chapman, this 2016, 5 years ago. Chapman strikes out, Belt swinging. Cubs win 6-5. No game 5. Game 4 to the Cubs, they win the series, go on to win the World Series. And I just remember leaving the ballpark. It was AT&T Park. And just thinking, oh, this is it, huh? It just ends here like this. Yeah. And, you get your souvenirs. You walk away because you don't want to see the Cubs celebrate and dogpile. 2016, it was Cub Blue right there on the field. And I was on the first base side. And I just I couldn't stay to watch. I slowly walked out of the park, 2016, wondering, well, this was our every other year, right? 2010, 12, 14, 16. We should have won then. We didn't. They didn't. I didn't play. And I just walked out of the stadium, grabbed a few souvenirs, and took Bart home. Quietly. They're just, somber. But I've been through it, and there's a little bit of, there's this sense of loss. There's kind of mourning involved. It's a little bit of grief. Or you really are mourning. And so yesterday it was bad. I felt bad when the Giants didn't score in the eighth inning. But I thought, if they scored in the eighth inning, the bottom of the eighth, then you couldn't have a kind of classic call like Bobby Thompson, the Bobby Thompson homer. The Giants win the pennant. The Giants win the pennant. You couldn't have that in the bottom of the eighth. You could only have that in the bottom of the ninth. So we were set up for the bottom of the ninth, but first, of course, top of the ninth, the Dodgers score their one run. Camilo Doval hits Justin Turner, makes him a base runner, and Justin Turner scores the winning run. So painful, but it's not impossible to make up a one-run deficit, or at least a tie. So here we are, bottom of the ninth, and all our good hitters are coming up, especially, who was the first hitter? Chris Bryant gets a single. And I'm thinking about 2016. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Chris Bryant is. He got that. Well, actually, the first one was Brandon Crawford. He lined out. Okay, tough. But Chris Bryant gets the first on that ground ball. Lamont Wade, he was the hope. Late night Lamont, right? Strikes out looking. And I could just feel that. I know how tense that he must have been. I don't know. I don't know. It was a ball that looked outside. Actually, caught the corner, but there were a lot of strikes, a lot of missed calls by the umpires. The biggest one, maybe involving Wilmer Flores, the next batter. It's tough enough. You got to face Max Scherzer, whom Dodger manager Dave Roberts said was his ace in the hole. Because you save your best pitcher to get the last three outs. That's playing the game in this sort of modern tactical way, using all your weapons. It's like remember that Asian American guy in Jeopardy? He started by picking all the high numbers first. He didn't start at, Jeopardy, baseball for 100. He started with baseball for 1,000. And he worked his way. He turned the game on its head. Remember that guy? So, that's what this whole approach to baseball is about now. It's like reconfiguring the game and the strategy and the tactics. So it really is like a chess match. And so here is Max Scherzer putting the big foot on the Giants' neck. And Wilmer Flores, the former Met, he's up. It's up to him. There's a runner on. A triple, that would do. A double, just getting someone on base, that would do. A home run would be great. Because then you could have that 1951 call repeated. The Giants win the pennant. The Giants win. You could have that. And I've always been a big Wilmer Flores fan. I know Brandon Belt at first would have been better. He was the home run leader, but Wilmer's had a lot of big hits for the Giants, and I'm a Wilmer Flores fan. So here comes the pitch. Flores looks like he check swings. They go to first base umpire to just to double check. The first base umpire calls Wilmer Flores out, even though Flores' bat does not. He doesn't snap his wrist. The bat does not cross the plate. Game over. So it was just unbelievably disappointing because it was over just like that. It had to sink. You had to let it sink in, though. Dodgers win, right? So with the memory of 2016 and just being mindful about the Giants, I don't begrudge the bad call by the ump on the check swing. I just say, the Giants had one heck of a year. No one expected them to be half this good. No one expected them to finish respectably, right? People thought, the Diamondbacks, for sure, they would be better. The Padres, for sure, they would be better. No. The Giants were better than them all. Better than the Dodgers in the regular season. And then just was one run short in a Game 5 in the division series. So now the Dodgers go on to the championship series against the Braves. Probably they'll win. The Dodgers will go on to play the Red Sox or the Astros. I'm thinking maybe the Astros, although I'm kind of rooting for the Red Sox. Because, I have a little Boston connection. And then maybe it's Boston, who really didn't figure to be there either. And maybe it's Boston upsetting the Dodgers. I don't see it, but got to root against the Dodgers. But what really helped me is just, like I said, understanding that the Giants had a great season. No one expected it. And, a little grieving. I have to admit, I consulted Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Yeah. I skipped over denial. I skipped over a lot of the steps. I tried to go into acceptance. Accepting the fact that they lost. A lot of people say, look, why? Why does this upset you so much? And the fact is it shouldn't. It shouldn't. But we put so much stock in these things. I don't know. It does seem irrational, right? There are other things more important. Surely there are. But I guess in these times, when your team wins, that's a fair amount of goodness that you can ride throughout all the difficulties that we face now. And yeah, more important things than a baseball game. But there's something soothing when your team wins. And there are still lessons to be learned when your team loses. Like, get over it. They had a good year. We'll get them next time. So, but what a year. 2021 San Francisco Giants. And I know that for some of you, you'll say, God, my husband's the same way. He just cried all night, or, but just as, there are Northern California fans and people, Asian American fans, this was a great series because you really couldn't lose. because there are Asian American fans who are Dodgers and Asian American fans certainly who are Giants up in Northern California. But still, good luck to the Dodgers. I hope they get beaten by the Red Sox or the Astros. But and good luck to the Giants. I think they'll come back. They'll come back next year if I don't know. A lot of it is, do the Giants want to have? Do they want to spend the money to extend Posey's contract, who looked kind of gassed and looked like he wasn't sure if he wanted to return? In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he said, "Look, I'm going to retire," because the Giants have some good catching prospects. No one like Posey, but they have some good catching prospects, and he's going out on top. Why not? Of course, Brandon Belt got extended, or excuse me, Brandon Crawford got extended. Brandon Belt might get extended. Too bad about his thumb. That was a bad omen. But maybe the vets will have one more good year. They can come back. And maybe that'll convince Posey to come back. But a good offseason for Logan Webb, who looks like he's going to be the ace. They need to add a few more pieces, spend some money, re-sign Chris Bryant, because I think Chris Bryant really helped. He's a player. He's a star. And Evan Longoria, man, he looked so good toward the end of the season. He just didn't have it at the end. I feel for him. I don't know if he's going to be around. Always been an Evan Longoria fan. But it's been mixed until just the last year. He's come along. We'll see what happens with the Giants. All right. I wanted to mention a couple other things. And it had to do with the labor statistics. Because they keep talking about labor. I'm only going to spend a couple minutes on this because this story, I subscribe to all these papers. I was reading this story caught my attention in the Wall Street Journal. Rodents the size of St. Bernards swarm an exclusive gated community. Can you imagine that? Look, I'm an animal rights person too, but if you've got rodents the size of St. Bernards, I don't think this is an April Fool's story either. I think this is in Argentina, in Nordelta. But I think they run this story so that people in New York don't feel so bad. Oh, we have rats. Oh, you think you have rodents? You ought to see these in Argentina. They have gauchos on these rodents. They're so big. God, can you imagine? You need gauchos on these rodents? The world's largest rodents. They're called, let's see, what's their name? They're called capybaras. Capybaras. It's the most popular piece. It's the most popular piece in the Wall Street Journal because everyone says, "Oh, you think you've got big rats? I'm in New York and we've got bigger." Oh no, you've got big rats, Argentina. I think that's no, that's the number one story in the Wall Street Journal today. This story though is good too. 4.3 million workers are missing. Where did they go? I'm going to save this for next week because it's worth talking about. Because there's a reason why people are leaving the corporate world. And you can just read. Of course, this is reported in the Wall Street Journal because the corporations, they don't want to acknowledge this, but yeah, people are important in their world. Not much, but they are. I mean, there's strikes all over the country right now. There's a John Deere strike. I believe it's, I forget what union, but they're striking in the Midwest, there's a potential IATSE strike in LA over streaming rights. They want meal penalties. I knew meal penalties as a member of After SAG because people say, "Oh, I got to work with a meal." That's a meal penalty. Anyway, this is the lead in the Wall Street Journal on this. 4.3 million workers are missing. Where did they go? Scarce labor is becoming a fixture of the U.S. economy, reshaping the workforce and prodding firms to adapt by raising wages, reinventing services, and investing in automation. Scarce labor. Think about that. So, as an adjustment to scarce labor, meaning there's not that much, we're the workers, right? They're thinking about reshaping the workforce. What does that mean? More young people or more old people? Prodding firms to adapt by raising wages, of course. That's where the workers are holding out for. You got to give them something meaningful for their time. I mean, the idea of slave wages is a real thing if you're paying them under what is considered a living wage. You got to raise wages. Now, reinventing services, okay, yeah, that's a good thing. What do we want people to do for the money that we give them that'll make it more fair? And finally, investing in automation. Well, yeah, that's the corporate way. Get rid of the people, put in robots. Get rid of the people, put in mechanization. That's not the answer either. You got to invest in your people, and you got to make it worthwhile to the people. It shouldn't be that hard to understand why more than a year and a half into the pandemic, the U.S. is still missing around 4.3 million workers. You know, some people have just given up looking for work because it's not worth it. It's not worth it's worth my time to talk to you here on YouTube than it is to work for some corporate slaveholder or shareholder, some corporate entity that will underpay me because what? You're too brown, too old, too smart, too whatever. You're not fitting into their HR category. That's important. That's what you got to ask. A lot of people are wondering about this, about what's going on with our labor force. And one person said, well, a lot of the experts say, well, a lot of it is because it's divided by people who can work remotely versus people who can't. And now the people who can't work remotely are saying, oh, wait a minute. We need a sense of fairness or we're quitting our jobs. I'm not going to work at Taco Bell. I'm not going to work at, retail. Well, you got to make things worthwhile for people to give up their lives. Now, the silver lining is that maybe all these people have gone into the entrepreneurial ranks. Maybe they're finding ways to make money on the internet. Maybe they're doing good deeds. Maybe they're being supported by spouses or families, but they're doing positive things in life. That would be a positive thing. I mean, a silver lining that we gotten to a point in society where people are saying we don't have to live with these non-livable wages. I don't know. Do you think we're there? And then the other thing of privilege, there are still people of color, people who are not wealthy or supported by spouses or family, who aren't able to find jobs. And they find themselves taking the jobs that no one wants. They find themselves in those retail jobs, in those fast food jobs, in those service jobs. Where have we heard that before? All throughout history, when it comes to the BIPOC community. We come in, people say, oh, you're taking our jobs. Oh, those are jobs we don't want anyway. We've been here before. The question now is, in the old days, they opened up immigration and they said, come on in, Chinese, you fill our labor force. Then they excluded the Chinese and they said, come on in, Filipinos, you are our colonized people. Come be the labor force. And then they excluded them. What's going to happen now with immigration? You don't hear it talked about in terms of some kind of comprehensive reform. You don't even hear anything about the DACA folks. Not now. Biden's got too much on his plate. Congress has too much at stake with the Infrastructure Act. Although supposedly there should be some money for the DACA folks in that infrastructure bill, the social infrastructure, or the Reconciliation Act. We'll see. So when you hear people talk about 4.3 million, 4.3 million workers missing, just consider the fact that there are some Asian Americans who aren't working, who still want to work. What's going to happen? A way to think about that number, because it's been tossed around a lot. Are people thinking about a more meaningful life? Possibly. Something to think about. All right, we're going to end our show on that note. I didn't want to just end it on the Giants. I'm still, I admit, I'm still a little, I'm trying to be equanimous to it. Trying to say, yeah, no judgment. Giants had a good year. Let's move on. Let's look forward to the 2022 season. Because the 49ers are going to make us feel any better. And I don't know. What are the teams? Oh, the Warriors. The Warriors look good. And there was Stephen Curry with his wife. They were showing him on TV, watching the Giants game. The Warriors, they're the hope. They're the hope. Hey, look, we're here Monday through Friday. Yeah, Monday through Friday live, 2 p.m. Pacific. I'll replay some of the shows on all the different platforms. This is Emil Amok's Takeout Live, number 159, where we ask, what does an Asian American think about anything? You can email me at emil@amok.com. You can, let's see, what else? Oh, you can follow me on Twitter at Emil Amok, EMIL AMOK. You can see more at amok.com. All my links to my columns on the ALDEF site, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. And you can always email me. Email? You believe Emil believes in email? Yeah, I believe in email. Emil is, let's see. Here it is. Emil@amok.com. Emil@amok.com. Hey, this is the Micro Talk Show, the AAPI and the AAXs and the ALL. If you're either of those aforementioned groups, thank you for being here. It's birthday week for me. I learned a lot. I mean, if you're open and non-judgmental, you can learn a lot, even at this advanced stage in life. And it's been a good birthday week, except for those darn Giants, but that's all right. That's all right. I'm equanimous to that. Have yourselves a good, great weekend. And as I wish for me, I say to you, may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. And may you live with ease. Till next time, Emil Guillermo. Mahal Kita.